Hi, guys. Welcome back to the channel. So, today I want to talk about the real cost of this war with Iran, whether you're for this war or not. In this video, I want to talk about what we could have done with the amount of money that we're spending over there, the amount of cash that we're spending to missiles, bomb airplanes, just to keep these aircraft carriers out there. What other ways could we have used that money? So, this war right now is burning through almost close to $1 billion a day, and that money traces back to all of us, every single American, every single taxpayer, either now or future debt and interest. We're gonna have to pay for this, right? Put simply, Washington is burning through enough cash right now. The Pentagon and this government is burning through enough cash right now to fix real problems back home. But the problem is they just choosing not to do that. They're choosing not to do so. Now the question is, what is this war costing per day? No one in Pentagon right now is giving a clean public number, but independent analysts have pieced it together. From briefings to Congress and munition data, in the first days of the war, the Defense Department told Congress that it spent about $11.3 billion in just 6 days. That math works out to about $1.8 billion per day. At the very start, when all the missiles were flying, everything was going full throttle. We spent that much money in just less than a week. Some estimate put the current daily cost in the hundreds of millions of dollars. One independent tracker that starts from official tallies and think tanks estimates $1 billion a day, depending on the intensity of the operation. By mid-March, credible estimates show the Iran war had already blown past $20 billion and would cost roughly $25 billion within weeks. Okay, within the coming weeks. We just spent $20 billion in just roughly in about a month. To put that in plain speak, the US is spending in a week what many big cities do not see in federal help in an entire year. And the war is still going, up until recently. So currently right now, we have a so-called truce, a ceasefire, but we're still blockading Iran ships. Iran is still shooting missiles at ships. I believe recently just hit two ships in the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, it's they're not dropping bombs at each other, meaning American bases are not getting hit, and we're not launching missiles onto Iranian soil. But the war is not over. Those aircraft carriers are still out there. We're still having to pay for the fuel, the just to keep these aircraft carriers at sea. It costs a lot of money, the crew, all of it. So the question is, what does all of this mean for taxpayer? The federal government does not have this money laying around, right? So it's not like they can go under the mattress, lift the money up, and just grab it. This money, we're already running a deficit, about $1.9 trillion a year, and we're just piling on top of that debt, right? So this thing here, it's just not sustainable. This is going to be well over 100% of the entire economy, the amount of debt that we're going to accrue from this whole thing. And whatever the price tag is right now, just later on is going to be more when everything is tallied up. And so that means this war cost is effectively going on our national card, basically on our credit card, the national credit card, which you and I, the taxpayers, we have to pay off later on with interest. At Brown University, they did a study. It's called the Cost of War Project. They found that 20 years of post 9/11 wars have cost $8 trillion in total, far above the headline or whatever Pentagon said, far above the headlines. We spend this amount. No, we spend a lot more than that. An early accountant for Iraq and Afghanistan alone, they calculated that the real bill per taxpayer was roughly 3 times higher than the Pentagon's simple war zone numbers. Once you include veterans care, interest payments on that money that we borrowed, and other knock-on costs, maybe replacing planes or whatever. Right, the same playbook is also being used right now. Politician talks about the operation budget, but the full tab, care for the wounded troops, replacing equipments, missiles, higher interest payments on new war debt, that thing shows up for years after the shooting stops. So whatever we're doing now, we're going to be paying for this for years to come. Now, the question is what that money could fix at home. What could we have done with all this money? Whatever money we spend in one day in Iran for that war, imagine if we could spend that money differently. Let's say we're going to call it, let's say $1 billion, right? So that's what we're spending right now, about $1 billion a day. Now, what would that money do? What could we do back home with that money? Well, number one, we can fix housing and homelessness. The White House own budget talks about a long standing shortage of affordable housing and sets aside tens of billions of dollars over multiple years to try to ease rent and expand low income housing. A single war day's funding is enough to build or rehab tens of thousands of affordable units if targeted well. That's the key point here. If you target this thing well, because we've seen like in California, they spent $20 billion in 5 years to end homelessness, but homelessness only got bigger. It kept growing. So there's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of waste there. But if we can target this thing properly without all these NGOs and waste and so on, we can really make a real impact here. So instead of leaving families, couch surfing or, living in cars, we can really make an impact and help in just one day of war with Iran. Now, what else can we do with that money? Well, schools and teachers. The federal education budget describes efforts to address teacher shortages, especially in poor communities, by adding and paying more public school teachers. Well, what an idea, right? One day of war could cover hiring and paying thousands of teachers for a year in underfunded school districts, reducing class sizes and keeping art, music, and special ed programs alive. Right. So a lot of these neighborhoods, if in New York, let's say, Brownsville, East New York, the Bronx, a lot of different areas in the city that can use federal help and can I use some of that money to alleviate, crowded classrooms and paying teachers more. So just one day of war, we can pay enough teachers for a year to help in those areas. What else can we do with that money? Let's see, child poverty and childcare. When the expanded child tax credit was in place in 2021, federal data shows it cut child poverty nearly in half for a year by simply getting cash to families who needed it. The administration's budget also talks about capping childcare costs at about $10 a day for most families. But this version needs sustained funding to become a reality. 1 or 2 days, just 1 or 2 days of Iran war spending could finance a large nationwide childcare push or a temporary boost to the child tax credit, giving working parents real breathing room here. What else can we do with this money? Let's see, infrastructure, internet. The Commerce Department budget in briefs requests about $11.4 billion in discretionary money for things like high speed internet, data infrastructure, and other economic development. That's barely more than about a week, roughly about a week, maybe 2 weeks of war spending. The same money could instead wire rural communities, modernize ports, or harden the power grid. Our infrastructure is not that great. Every day of fighting abroad represent choices not to fix potholes, replace lead pipes, Flint, Michigan, right? Keep buses running or cover insulin for people who are rationing insulin at home. So the long shadow beyond today's bill. The scariest part is not just today's price tag, but the long tail of this war. When Brown's University team added up 20 years of post 9/11 wars, interest on debt, and care for veterans, that the final payment, what they saw based on their research was $8 trillion, not the $1 or $2 trillion that's often cited in speeches, 'cause that's BS. That kind of hidden cost squeezes the federal budget for decades, leaving less room for domestic priorities without raising taxes. I mean, you have to raise taxes to balance out this budget and pay for these things all these wars that we're always getting ourselves involved in. The Congressional Budget Office warned, the CBO, Congressional Budget Office warns that as debt rises toward about 118% of GDP by the mid 2030s, interest alone eats more and more of the budget, crowding out spending on things like education, housing, or scientific research. Layer in another large open ended war on top of that pile means more of tomorrow's tax revenue goes just to pay interest and past war bills and not to fix any current problems that we have. In plain terms, your kids, your grandkids will be paying taxes for missiles that were launched years before they could even vote. The real security question leaders like to sell wars as national security, but there's another kind of security that really makes the news. Economic security is knowing that you can pay your rent, see a doctor, drink clean water, and send your kids to a decent school. Federal document on a budget talks about these goals: more affordable housing, better childcare, stronger schools. But then what do? They turn around and accept massive new war costs that pull everything in the opposite direction. So the true cost of the war in Iran on American taxpayers is not just the hundreds of millions of dollars spent each day overseas, but also it is the roads not fixed, apartments not built, teachers not hired, children not being lifted out of poverty, choices made quietly far from the battlefield, but is being felt by every struggling town and city in this country. So the frustration that a lot of people are having is that no one wanted this, like no one voted for this. But yet again, here we are. So that is going to be all for today, guys. If you find value in this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you soon.